Hey guys, and welcome back to the Christian Witch Podcast. My name is Chosen, also known as at Christian Witch HTX over on Instagram and Threads now, and Facebook, YouTube, TikTok especially. And you can find me at Christian Witch HTX for those of you who are just joining. This is season 3, kind of mind blowing, but here we are. And you can find all my information at christianwitchhtx.com. I am a certified professional psychic medium and all that fun stuff, but I'm joined today by our lovely co-host, Lux. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself, and then we're going to get rolling. So, tell the people who you is.
Hey guys, it's Lux with Lux Intuitive Therapy. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook mostly. I have a website, luxintuitivetherapy.com. And I'm also a trained, certified professional psychic reading. I offer spirit-guided tarot readings. That's what I kind of rebranded it as, trying to...
Yep. Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Occultist.
Occultist, magician. Yeah, I've rebranded lately. It's been good.
Triple threat. It's fine.
Triple threat.
Well, it's more than 3, but we'll go with that. Anyway, so we're back, and we're going to talk today about, what did we decide to talk about? Just remaining teachable, being able to hold multiple worldviews,
yeah,
on your spiritual path, the paradoxes that come along, the philosophy, the wait a minute, that don't make sense moments.
Yeah, I feel like one of the hallmarks of seeing that you're progressing spiritually, I suppose, is how you're able to hold multiple ideas in your mind at a time, because the spirit that are seemingly contradictory, right? Because the spirit world, the world of the spirit, is full of paradoxes and things that just seem contradictory to what you would think. How holding on to things too tightly can actually cause them to slip away like grains of sand, through your hands, and how, what we fear sometimes we can attract, and how everything seems, I do believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And on occasion, and this is what the whole podcast is about, is how there are a lot of spiritual axioms and there are a lot of truth statements, but they're not true in every single case. And that doesn't mean that they are untrue or that they don't apply, right? Because as you progress through the world of the spirit, there's one thing that becomes extremely apparent, is that this world and the next is extremely nuanced and complex and dynamic. And being able to hold contradictory ideas in your mind and still make sense of everything and not go nuts is, it's a sign that you're progressing, and it's a sign that you're starting to understand the greater and greater reality, which is the spirit.
I like the way you worded that, because I often tell people, a really good sign that you're leveling up and progressing and developing spiritually is being able to start connecting the dots between
Yep.
different systems, especially in the metaphysical realm. You'll read 7 books that are saying the same things, but they're using different traditions and different verbiage, and it's once you start connecting those dots, you're oh, this is that's a good check-in point to be hey, I'm moving along here, I'm making sense of things. And you're right, it's another sign, when you're able to hold multiple perspectives and understand that, yes, this is true, but sometimes this other thing is true.
Yeah, how we think that it is a strength to not be vulnerable. We think that if we cry or we back down or we surrender, that's cowardice. And it's actually, as we progress through the spiritual spaces, we start realizing that surrender is a lot of times the greatest strength. Mm-hmm. And showing emotion is a source of strength. It's not a source of weakness at all.
Exactly.
And so these things that we were taught at one point, they start to fall away. And another big one that
What?
It slipped my mind.
Oh, that's okay. It happens.
I never do that.
Just give it a second. I'm sure it'll come to you.
Okay, I got it. So it's how being dependent on our Creator, on God, prayer, relying on the divine plan, understanding that there is a underlying outline to this universe, and relying upon that, understanding that the universe has you well in hand, right? That dependence on that actually gains us independence, because it frees us up from a lot of exhaustion and a lot of worry about frivolous things like, oh, well, what if I don't get that job, or what if he doesn't actually like me, or what if this. We don't have to worry about that. What we do is in the here and now, and we can only do our best right here, right now, and put our best foot forward and do the action towards our goal. But the outcome of it is literally the universal plan, right? And so if we trust and have complete dependence upon the universal plan or God's plan in that way, then we actually gain a lot of independence, because we don't waste so much time worrying, stressing over all the things that we hope will happen, because it's this realization that I actually don't have control over the future and how things play out, but I do have control over what's going on right now. So that really helped me, because I used to be a big worrywart and would have no faith, no trust in God.
Well, another aspect of that is like when you're studying this stuff, especially if you come from a religious background, you're like, you know, we've been trained like in modern society, like, you know, like you are responsible for your actions, like everything's on your shoulders. And so like if you're holding any sort of fear or like religious trauma that any of this is dark, it can be scary to explore new philosophies and new ideas for the sake of getting it wrong, quote unquote, or being deceived by some demon somewhere, right? Or evil entity, whatever the fear may be rooted in, whatever it is. But, you know, one of the things I also teach my students is you have to trust that the Creator is big enough and good enough that if you actually have a relationship with them, they're more able to keep you safe than evil's ability to deceive you, right?
That's exactly right.
So it's that dependence on the goodness of the Creator. Another thing that we were talking about recently was like, you know, like healing, you know, like personally I have witnessed and facilitated, been a part of several miracles taking place, like miraculous healings, miracles, signs, and wonders, signs that make you wonder. And then there's other times we pray for people and they don't get better. There's other times we do things and nothing happens, and you're like, well, what the heck? It either works or it doesn't.
Right.
And it's like, I've seen it work more times than not, and I've seen it work so many times that I'm not going to not try.
Right.
But I also understand that sometimes, for whatever reason, it doesn't occur.
God's will.
I mean, yeah, exactly. And I think, for instance, like a good example was there's an absolutely wonderful minister who passed away last year, dedicated her life. I'm not talking about like the kind of person that like capitalizes off of fame or anything like that. They were, they weren't like televangelists or like trying to become a brand or anything like that. Like they genuinely loved people and prayed for people and saw them healed and like traveled and did actual like hands in the dirt kind of work with people, spent their life praying for people, seeing miracles after miracles after miracles, and had cancer the whole time and never saw breakthrough for herself. And it's like, what do you say to that?
Right.
What do you say to that is that God is good regardless of what happens. The Creator has goodness regardless of what happens. You know, something recently, I don't know if I've said this at a podcast or not, but, you know, bad things happen when good people are involved, and good things happen when bad people are involved, and we can't discredit any of those experiences because of the factors that whoever was present.
Right.
Yeah, so, you know, it's being able to say, yeah, we have full access to the kingdom here and now, while also understanding that the kingdom is here, but also yet to come.
Right.
You know?
And that's the paradox, or the paradigm, I guess, is, and that's the whole being able to hold multiple seemingly contradictory ideas in mind. Because when in the world of the spirit, all paradoxes are rectified. Everything makes sense. It's just that on this planet there are a combination of like divinity and impurity. And so we live in this world of perception where we're always, because we are divine creatures, we are always searching for like the absolutist statements, the perfection statements, the what makes sense across the board. Why isn't it simple? Why isn't it all divine? Why isn't it all 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, just tell me how it is, and there's no like gray area. It's either black or white, and that's what we're always going for, because when we have come from that source of divinity, all we experienced was perfection. All we experienced was everything happening according to plan, everything happening exactly as we imagined it. On the mental realm, when you think of something, it is perfect and the idea happens. But people who have had brilliant ideas before, which most of the listeners probably have, I have, you have, and have tried to implement them in reality, understand that there is some sort of imperfection that happens when bringing down the mental realm, the divine realm, into and earthing it and actually manifesting it. And it's just a consequence of the natural law that we're living under, which is bringing things from the divine into the material realm. So there's going to be these imperfections, and it's not always heaven on earth here. And I think that if you understand that, well, it's not always heaven on earth, well, does that mean that earth does, or that heaven doesn't exist? No,
absolutely not.
So it's broadening the understanding and realizing that, these spiritual axioms make sense at the time that you need them, but that's what they're for. They're for you, and they're for when you need them. And the trouble becomes when I take those spiritual axioms and start trying to apply it to every other situation in my life, or even worse, in someone else's life, because they may need a different, seemingly contradictory spiritual axiom instead, and a lot of this starts hitting on, spiritual bypassing and things that we've talked about on the podcast and stuff like that.
And another thing about that is, like, no one's saying that believe everything you hear or read. Right. It's, at some point, someone's going to be wrong. It may be you. It may be me. Like, someone's going to get something wrong. It's like, not everything is relative. At some point, like, if Lux and I are standing across from each other and she looks down and sees a 6 and I see a 9, it's going to come down to the fact that somebody meant to put a 6 there. Right. And it's my perspective is seeing it incorrectly. And so this is where, those of you who have a relationship with Spirit, with Holy Spirit, this building that interpersonal relationship, getting to know that character, sitting in that presence really matters, because you begin to cultivate discernment, and you're able to say, okay, how can I make sense of this in the character of the Holy Spirit, this presence that I know to be so good. And there's some times where it doesn't make sense, but like, I can tell you right now, having seen those healings, having had authentic encounters with Holy Spirit that are beyond my mind, they're beyond, like, I'm not making them up, they're external experiences, they're happening to more than just me. Having had those experiences, and also having had, been a part of these miracle signs and wonders, and hearing other testimonies, when stuff doesn't happen, I can turn and say, you know what, like, I don't know why it didn't happen, but I know it doesn't mean that, quote unquote, God is evil because it didn't happen, It gives you something to stand on, and that's what faith is. It's the substance of things not yet seen. It's the hope for that which we haven't seen yet. But also understanding that there is this access. I believe that our spirit is where heaven invades earth. We become the portal, and because we have free will, that's how we release these heavenly realities on earth. But for instance, if you stay inside and don't ever go try, like, they don't get released. Does it mean that we have 100% accuracy guarantee every time? No, because we're not in a perfect state. There's impurities in the way. It doesn't mean that you're wrong or I'm wrong or someone's faith wasn't faithy enough. It just means that sometimes there's just things that there's no one's fault. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't try again. I had somebody in my living room get their hearing back after a decade of going to people and trying to get their hearing back and believing for it and praying for other people and having them be miraculously healed. They finally got their hearing back. And it doesn't mean you should give up. So that's what it means. It's like, what do you do with that kind of information? When you zoom out and you look at it, you're like, what do you do with that? Not everything makes sense. And that's something Lux and I have been talking about in the last several months, almost the last year, really, is like, we need to stop trying to explain and stop trying to over-scientific or scientifically explain everything magically or mystical, and understand that sometimes we just have to learn to flow with the energy. And we have a working theories, we have working operational theories,
working theories,
and,
I have a lot of those.
and they can change.
Right.
And this is something that I've recently been going through myself. Like, for those of you who don't know, like, I do music outside of this, and part of some healing work I've been doing is having compassion for the places I used to be in my spiritual walk. And back in the day, I was signed to a Christian label, and the record that I made with them, I listened through, and it's great, but there are a couple of like harmful ideas and incorrect ideas that I believed at the time, and I was being authentic in the moment. And so my whole point in saying all this is, even be true to who you are now in the moment, and what you feel and can discern is correct. And even if that changes tomorrow or the next day, that's okay, because you're still living authentically in the moment. Tomorrow's not promised. And so even if you're continually changing, that doesn't mean you have no bearing or no footing, unless you're just like not doing the work and you're just like coasting. But you get what I'm saying. Like, even if your beliefs change, it's okay. You're being authentic and you're living in the now. But we do want to like get the point across, is that like you have to be able to hold space for these differing worldviews, so to speak.
Yeah, because I've made the mistake many times, and my entire worldview has come crashing down around me, because if we get so locked in and build this house around ourselves, like, oh, I've got it figured out, continuing to place these bricks of I have it all figured out, we box ourselves in, literally. Because now we have all of these things that we've written off as set in stone, and they're unmovable. Well, sooner or later you're going to find yourself built yourself into a box, and so when you're boxed in like that, the mind becomes closed, and you don't allow yourself the room to grow and the room for freedom, and the understanding that maybe certain things and ideas worked for me a year ago, but those same things are not applying today. And it's being willing and able and feel free to change your mind and continue to grow and find things that make sense. And maybe you'll come to a point where you say, well, actually, that worked for me at that time, and this works for me now, and they seem to be contradictory, but actually they're both true. And they both make sense, because when you have this paradigm and you're operating under this worldview, these things are things that help. But when you're operating under this paradigm and this worldview, and you've progressed now a year, and you've done the work, and you're in a different spot, and your mind is different. And so it's just holding space for different where people are at, holding space for different paradigms, different worldviews, what people are. And really what it is the expansion of empathy for yourself and empathy for others. And it's just absolute unconditional love and tolerance of interacting with people. We talk about this a lot, meeting them where they're at, and being able to hold in your mind that they are operating under ideas and stuff that help them right now. And just because you've moved on for that, or realize that, like, they're going to move on as well at some point, or they're going to, so the best thing that I've found for me, so that I don't experience these like world shattering things, is to keep such an open mind. I used to tell people all the time, I believe in everything. I believe in anything and everything. You can come to me and tell me something. Yeah, sure, that's probably exists somewhere in this universe. You know what I mean? I believe in like this realm of possibilities, even though it may contradict my own, right? So what I'm saying is that you're going to continue to change and grow, and that's the whole point of this journey. The point of it is not to figure all this stuff out. When I first started my journey, I was looking for truth. I just wanted to know the truth. What's the truth? What's going on here? How does it all work? And the thing is this is my opinion, I don't think anyone is ever going to have it 100% completely figured out. And that's okay, because your experience is the only true measure of proof of anything anyway. If your experience is proving to you that these worldviews are working at this time, and like Chosen was saying, you're being authentic in that moment, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I agree. And you've said it, I've said it in this podcast, but we're all just trying to explain how this works so we can wrap our head around it.
Right.
We're all wanting and let that be proof of your, like, where like you have faith in it already. You're like, how does that work? Because you believe it's there, so now you're trying to explain it to yourself.
Yeah. This podcast is definitely more abstract than the ones we've done.
For sure, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
But that's the nature of this whole podcast, right?
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. So if you're following along, that's great. I feel that your listeners are going to be able to follow along very well, and the reason why is because a lot of y'all are already familiar with these taking two seemingly contradictory things and putting them together, right? Like the whole Christian witch thing is a paradox.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly. That's a good example.
I mean, that's literally, this is a meta podcast, right? Like, we're literally podcasting about y'all, about the podcast. We're podcasting
about us, you guys. It's fine.
So that was kind of the last thing that I had on our list to talk about, was touch on, and this is going to be very familiar to the reader, for the listener, but understanding that, you know, occult practices and philosophy and religion or theosophy, these are all things that, you know, one thing is a craft and a practice and skills and techniques, and the other thing are like ways and designs for living, or or religious principles and different things like that. And you guys well know that, you know, the craft is a practice that you can develop, and on the other hand, you've got your connection with God, and you've got your spiritual beliefs, and you've got your Christianity, and, you know, having these two things come together. So my personal religious beliefs tend to fluctuate quite often. My personal philosophy tends to fluctuate a lot, but my tarot practice, my magical practice, my occult practices and things like that, those are things that aren't dependent on religion and things like, and you know, I was actually talking to someone the other day, and apparently this concept is not apparent to everybody, which I'm sure that most of our listeners will be, just because y'all have firsthand experienced it. But yeah, I mean, anyone can practice tarot if you didn't know that. Anyone can practice magic if you didn't know that. And I think that is another form of paradigm, when you realize that not everything is clear cut, not everything gets sorted into these neat little boxes, and people are such multifaceted spiritual beings, and we can't just pigeonhole every single, you know, that's another leveling up sign, is when we start taking each person and looking at them at the soul level and taking them at soul value, and realizing that everyone is so unique and individual, and stop like categorizing things, because for the sake of simplicity, we as human beings like to categorize things, and because we try to understand them, we try to make sense of it. And I found, and this may not be true for everyone, but this is my experience, the reason I tended to judge, categorize, place people in neat little boxes for myself, like, oh, there's those types of girls, right? There's those types of people, there's those types of you know what I mean? And I don't want anything to do with those types of people. So that's where the judgment started coming in. And you know, our ego has a tendency to do that. And so there's a tendency to do that in every single space we enter, and not just with people, but with ideas. You know, oh, well, that's a pagan view, or that's right?
So this is gonna mess with some of my listeners' minds.
Okay.
Because there's some people that, like, they've heard me say this so many times, or they've taken the class. We've talked about this recently, where I always say it's love versus fear. But fear itself is, I like to refer to it as, it's not necessarily evil in of itself. It's more like it's like a flag. It's like saying, hey, something's wrong here.
Yeah, it's the alert system.
Yeah.
Yes. But
we don't live in that. It's like, it's a trigger for love to become active and to change the circumstance.
So I preach the same thing when I talk about there's a lot of crap going on with the ego in the New Age, right? They think it's like the devil himself.
Yeah.
It's not, right? The ego is something that holds our basic instincts of life, you know, our desires for social instinct, for self-esteem, for society, for sex, all of the things that, you know, when we were evolving as a species, we need to keep us like moving forward, right? It's the things that told us, okay, no, you have to behave well and play well with others. You're going to get kicked out of the group, and you're going to be out there in the wilderness on your own.
Yeah, if you don't conform, you're out.
Exactly. If you don't if you don't behave a certain way, that's going to impact your sex relations, and you're not going to be able to procreate or mate with anybody, right? You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So these are the very
100%.
basic, like, instincts of life, and fear is one of those things too that the ego uses to say, hey, something's wrong. One of these instincts is being threatened or hurt in some way, or something is wrong, and it's the alarm system. And this is getting again into a certain paradigm that works, but then you eventually move on from it. But a big paradigm I lived under for a while was like you say, love versus fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, it was always the lower self, or the false self, the lower self versus the higher self, which is the same thing. And so it's like for a while that works, but then you understand later on that actually it's always been my spirit and my soul the entire time. And I went off and did my own things sometimes, but that was kind of a part of my plan, because I always was brought back. God always brought me back. So you start looking at, like, who am I? What am I? Is there these two parts of the self? And you start realizing, well, if there's two parts of the self, who the hell is envisioning the two parts of the self?
Yeah.
Well, there's got to be a third part that's observing that. Mm-hmm. So then what is that? So there's three now? Mm-hmm. Now who just observed the third one? So it's like this domino effect, but I'm getting kind of
that is a little abstract.
I'm getting a little off topic, but what I'm saying is that, at some point, we have to start to live in harmony with the ego instead of trying to beat it out. And that's what you're talking about, is understanding that fear can be a useful tool to alerting us when things are wrong. But it's like when your alarm if you have an alarm system in your house, it's like the alarm system in your house goes off not every single time someone's walking through the door, it's an intruder. Yeah. Right? It goes off when we just simply open the door. The alarm's just doing its job. It's just saying, hey, something could be wrong. Correct. Right? So we need to, like, look at that. But it's like operating from a place of the higher self or love is doing just that. It's having this, it's not being frantic in fear, not being frantic in the ego, and allowing that fear and allowing that ego to now call the shots. Like, oh my God, someone's breaking in. It's like, dude, no. Yeah, like, calm down. So it's when you're tapped in, like you were saying earlier, to genuine connection with the Holy Spirit and stuff, this stuff gets a lot easier.
But even with that example, it's perspective and understanding is what allows you to not be freaked out when you hear the noise go off.
Exactly, because you have a higher understanding. Like, no, I know what's going on. Now my cats, on the other hand, they don't know what's going on, so they're just freaked out.
Their consciousness has not developed that far.
Exactly, but that's and that's how it is, right? Because it's the difference between, that's kind of the difference between living from the lower self and the higher self, and that's a whole nother, like,
a whole different thing, girl.
A whole nother paradigm that works for a while, and then
there's just it's like flavors of soda, or flavors of beverages, or different types of teas. They work when you need them. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, like the chakras, they are an Eastern idea that has been changed in the West, but we use it to understand certain energies. But as we progress in our spirituality, sometimes we realize, actually, like, we don't want to use that. Maybe we want to replace it with these. Maybe we just want to go down to, there being 3 parts of us. Yeah, or focusing on, like, the body, mind, soul is more, like, accurate for you. Some people like to think of, like, 3 cauldrons. Yeah. I really like the idea of holding space for the elements within you, the 4 elements of creation. Well, spirit as well, so 5. So you see what I'm saying? Like, there's different ways of categorizing the way energies flow and affect you, and that's what we're doing with
cosmology is a whole nother thing.
But again, it's just working theory. And you can switch it out, or be like, actually this makes more sense one day, you know, while still being able to understand the other thing. So anyways, this was a great conversation. For those of you who don't know, we're chilling in my car right now, just talking about this. So if you hear the AC or the car, try not to die. It's 105 degrees currently, so it's probably like, can y'all hurry and wrap it up?
If y'all, that's all of our points. If y'all, honestly, I hope what I said made any sense.
Oh, it did.
I'm gonna be real, because these are abstract concepts for us.
I mean, and if not, here's the point. Go to our Instagrams and ask us questions so we can bring them up on the podcast.
Please do ask us questions about this. I feel like season 3, we're going to start getting into a little bit more abstract, like trying to bring the abstract down to practical reality.
Something we talked about a few weeks ago was, like, we want to give you guys practical, everyday magic, witchcraft, psychic
Right.
development. Like, what can you actually do? What can you listen to this podcast and then be like, oh, I'm gonna go try this week?
Yeah.
You know?
So I guess our point with this is that the more you can hold space for paradoxes, paradigms, and different worldviews,
And not be offended.
and not not, you know, write it off as false or true or whatever, right? Is just holding space for it. The more empathy you can have for other people. Now, something may be false or untrue for you and what you're going through, but the discernment comes in, do I really need to tell the other person that?
Correct. And that's another thing we go over,
right.
like, in the first week of our the academy, as I teach the students, I'm like, listen, like, we do myth busting, and so as we bust those myths, I'm like, okay, this doesn't mean we run and bust everyone's bubble in public. Like, for instance, the idea that, you know, like, when someone dies, people say heaven gained an angel. That's not how that works. But we don't correct them in that moment. You know?
You have compassion and empathy,
exactly.
right? Because typically when someone's using that phrase, someone probably just passed away.
Correct. And they need empathy and compassion. They don't need a cosmology lesson.
Exactly. So a lot of it is that, and being, I guess, the grounded aspect and the practical aspect of this is understanding that when you go and navigate outside of the occult spaces and with people who aren't in our niche little category, you know what I mean? Like,
you run into stuff.
Yeah, you run into stuff, and it's just making sure we remain grounded and always, for me, it's compassion, love, tolerance, and empathy every single time.
Yes.
That's what I have to continue to come back to, because otherwise I can spin off the top with self-righteousness and intellectual game playing and all 9 types of stuff, you know, because the occult space is so filled with information, and we start honing our skills and we start feeling real good about ourselves, you know what I mean? If we got to check ourselves also, you know?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of that I see in the occult spaces, is just the unwillingness to do the most basic spiritual thing, which is like seeing the other person's point of view.
Yeah, and you know what? We're going to leave you with this statement, because these are some of the things that you do learn as you grow, and some of these things are what they call, quote unquote, the greater mysteries as you develop. And so, like, we don't want to rob you completely of those things. We just want to give you, like, a little bit of, like, a lamp in the darkness. But just contemplate the fact that knowledge speaks and wisdom listens. That simple phrase is so powerful, and it really will make a difference for you. So,
I love that.
Yeah.
I'll just tack on and we can close it up.
Let's go for it.
But kind of the profound thing that was told to me was understanding the differences between knowledge, understanding, and wisdom.
Yeah.
You know, and like, knowledge is not everything.
Correct.
And it's, if you know anything about Kabbalah at all, it's actually, it's seen as a trap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at a very high level, it can become a trap, and that's the understanding, right? Is it a trap all the time? Knowledge is always a trap? No, right? But it can become so, just like water. Water in a healthy amount is good, but any too much of a good thing can be bad.
Correct. We can drown ourselves from drinking too much.
Right, and it's understanding the nuances of these things.
Well, that was good. Good stuff.
Good stuff.
All right, so tell the people where they can find you.
All right, yep. So I'm Intuitive Therapy by Lux. You can find me on Instagram, Lux Intuitive Therapy, also Facebook, and my website is luxintuitivetherapy.com.
Awesome. And then if you want to book a reading, join classes, go check out her website to book readings. And then for me, if you want to book a reading or join classes or any of that fun stuff, you guys, listen, I'm brain dead. I'm not even going to pretend that I have it all together right now, but you can find all of my information at christianwitchhtx.com. You can find me on all the social medias. You can book things with me. I offer all kinds of services. I offer professional spell work now, and I do one-on-one mentorship and things like that. And I don't even know if there's anything else to let you know about. So we love you so much. We're excited to be back in the groove of recording. Any final words?
I hope it made some sense
I hope it
to
made
somebody.
sense and it didn't just sound like the AC blasting. Love you guys. We'll see you later.
Bye.